Ambassador Daniel Danny Rojas stood beneath the blinding, antiseptic lights of the Galactic High Council chamber, trying not to sneeze. Something about the recycled air made his nose itch like crazy. He stifled it with a sniff, adjusted his sunglasses, yes, indoors, and glanced at the rows of towering, shimmering alien representatives who had all been glaring at him for the last 7 minutes. Some shimmered with bioluminescence, others clicked or buzzed in what he hoped wasn't a countdown to violence. Still, Danny grinned like a man who'd just crashed a yacht into a country club and asked for another margarita. Krex of the Dominion of Varlus rose to his full 10-foot height, chitin plates clicking ominously. He had the voice of a blender chewing on a wrench. The presence of the Terran delegate is a courtesy, nothing more. A lesser species must know its limitations. Biological chaos, cultural ineptitude, and war records so embarrassingly primitive we couldn't stream them in polite company. Danny took a moment, then two. Then he adjusted his ridiculous floral tie. Well, Krex, you're not entirely wrong. But see, I've watched your war documentaries. Lot of lasers. Very impressive. Real sci-fi channel stuff. But if you think humans are just unevolved squirrels in pants, let me ask you, how many of your people survived a New Jersey Thanksgiving dinner with in-laws, 2 turkeys, and a gas leak? Krex tilted his long, horned head. Murmurs stirred. An aquatic delegate burbled nervously. Danny scratched behind his ear with the pen he never used. It was all theatrics, but he played it like Sinatra doing a Vegas comeback. I'm here for one reason, Danny continued, stepping forward as his earth-made loafers clacked against the hovering platform floor. Because somebody, he motioned around the chamber slowly, like a game show host revealing a prize, thought it'd be funny to authorize a live weapons test near a refugee ship carrying Terran engineers. Engineers, by the way, who were just trying to repair one of your malfunctioning trade satellites with duct tape and chewing gum, which worked, by the way. Krex made a sound that might have been a scoff or indigestion. Primitive resilience is not intelligence. Danny spread his arms. Neither is accidentally nuking your own moon because someone reversed the polarity of a logic crystal, which, again, was caught by one of our guys using a 1993 Hewlett-Packard laptop and an Atari controller. So, if you want to call us primitive, Krex, at least have the decency to spell it correctly in the incident report. There was silence. Brief, uncomfortable silence. Zira, the floating translator drone beside Danny, blinked several times in bright red LED confusion, recalculating insult ratio, clarifying idiom. Please stand by. Danny winked at it. You're doing great, sweetie. From the far end of the chamber, a representative of the Nithrix collective slithered forward on a path of translucent slime. The human refers to in-laws. Is this a military caste? Danny folded his arms. Worse. Family gatherings. You ever try explaining cryptocurrency to an uncle who still thinks the Cold War never ended? The chamber rumbled with confusion. Laughter, or something close, echoed from one corner. A crystalline being vibrated with amusement. Another diplomat whispered something that translated roughly to, "Does a species reproduce through jokes?" Krex didn't laugh. He turned to the center dais and addressed the Emperor's holographic projection. With respect, this creature is not a diplomat. He is a court jester. Earth sends jesters to a council of warfaring empires. Danny stepped forward again. You're missing the point, Krex. Humanity doesn't show up with shock troops or armadas. We show up with a clipboard, some caffeine, and a smile that says we either want to sell you a used car or file a formal complaint. Depends how the day goes. The Emperor's image shimmered. A robed, faceless projection representing 1,000 bureaucratic minds. It spoke in unison. Your kind has survived only by accident. You are not predators. You are statistical anomalies. That ends now. Danny slowly reached into his jacket pocket, ignoring the drawn gasps from some of the guards. He pulled out a small tin of Altoids, popped one into his mouth, and crunched. The sound echoed with unnatural clarity. You think we're not predators? He asked, voice calm. You ever been to an American Black Friday sale? We tore each other apart for TVs, flat screens. You want to talk about war? Try fighting a suburban mom over the last toaster oven with built-in Bluetooth. Krex hissed. Enough of this farce. You're right, Danny said, nodding. It's been a long day. I'm cranky. I miss real coffee. And I hate galactic meetings without lunch breaks. He turned slightly and made a casual gesture toward the back of the room. That said, since we're doing introductions, I probably should have mentioned earlier, I didn't come alone. There was a heavy shift in the air. A ripple of scent, or maybe fear, passed through the chamber like the first vibration of an earthquake. Guards turned. Delegates shifted. A low, resonant growl began somewhere off-screen, deep and primal. Then the doors at the rear creaked open. Silhouetted by the harsh chamber lights, a hulking figure stepped inside, broad-shouldered, armored in some crude, earthen alloy, formatted with ash, black visor shining like obsidian. 8 feet tall, wide as a hovercar, it walked with deliberate weight. Every step was a statement. Danny didn't even glance behind him. That's Frank. Krex's head tilted again, slower this time. Frank, Danny nodded. Yeah, just my +1. Don't worry. He doesn't speak much, but he listens real well. The guards inched closer to Krex's platform. A whisper darted across the room. Something about unauthorized species. Something about teeth. Is it human? Someone asked. Danny looked genuinely amused. Depends which part you're asking about. Genetically? Well, technically, he's Earthborn. But let's just say he didn't grow up on the nice side of the planet. Frank stepped forward and growled low. Several council delegates recoiled. A bot somewhere shut down from overstimulation. A spindly ambassador from a feathered moons of Uri fainted and slumped over its hovering seat. Biological anomaly detected. Zira chirped. Reclassifying threat level. Updating, oh dear. Oh dear. Frank came to a halt directly behind Danny, still as a statue, but humming with silent menace. The air smelled faintly of ozone and something like barbecue. Krex's voice dropped a full octave. You bring a weapon into the council? Danny's tone went icy. No. I brought insurance. You think we're not predators. You think humans are fragile. But we're not the apex. Not really. We're the ones who make deals with the apex. Shake hands with it. Buy it lunch. The Emperor's projection flickered. This is a violation of protocol. Danny chewed the mint for a moment, then spat it into a napkin. So was test firing a particle beam near an Earth relief ship. But we're not here to nitpick. The chamber was dead silent. Finally, Krex growled, turning toward the others. This is a threat. Danny stepped forward again, his smile colder now. No. This is clarity. You mocked our species. You underestimated what we adapt to. You thought we were jokes in meat suits. And we kind of are. But we're also survivors. Inventors. And occasionally, we raise things we probably shouldn't. He looked up at Krex, voice now razor-sharp. You call us a joke. But every galactic empire that did that, they're now documentaries we show to kids as cautionary tales. Krex tried to answer, but found his words caught in his throat. Danny clapped him on the shoulder, then turned back toward the exit. Frank remained perfectly still, eyes glowing softly through his visor. Danny tossed a final line over his shoulder as he walked. Oh, and Krex, you might want to tell your guards to stop aiming weapons at Frank. He doesn't like it. Gets twitchy. Frank's visor pulsed red for one heartbeat. Then darkness returned. And silence. Only the sound of soft footsteps as a man in a floral tie left the council chamber with a predator at his back and 1,000 questions burning in his wake. Danny adjusted the cheap plastic sunglasses on his nose as he and Frank strode down the corridor outside the council chamber. The silence in the hallway was thick, not with tension but stunned confusion. Alien aides and functionaries pretended to look busy while clearly watching the two humans walk past. A few made discreet recordings, which would inevitably be banned later by their respective governments for security reasons. Danny didn't care. That was tomorrow's headache. Right now, his blood buzzed with the familiar adrenaline of knowing he'd just poked a political hornet's nest with a spork and walked away whistling. He glanced at Frank. You did great back there. The breathing, that low rumble thing, terrifying. 10 out of 10. Frank didn't answer. He never did. He merely kept walking, silent as a tombstone. Danny didn't know what Frank's voice sounded like. Didn't even know if the man, if man was still the right term, could talk anymore. But his presence was more than enough. And that was what mattered in places like this. A chime rang through the corridor, signaling an incoming transmission. Danny groaned, pulled a small communicator out of his jacket, and flipped it open like a 90s flip phone. Rojas here. Go for charisma. The screen fizzed for a moment, then resolved into the scowling face of Director Mason of Earth's Interstellar Diplomacy Bureau. A man with a perpetual scowl and the complexion of someone raised exclusively under fluorescent lighting. Mason looked like he'd been carved out of expired tax forms. Rojas, what the hell did you just do? Danny grinned. You're gonna have to be more specific. I've done a lot of things I'm not proud of in the last hour alone. You brought Frank to the council? They brought a death ray. I brought an emotional support war crime. Seemed balanced. Mason's forehead pulsed. You're provoking a military response. Krex already submitted a formal protest. The Nithrix Collective is calling an emergency session. You've destabilized an entire diplomatic cycle. Danny leaned against a wall, looking way too casual. Yeah, well, maybe destabilization's what we need. You ever notice how every time we play nice, somebody blows up a Terran outpost by accident? Maybe it's time they stop thinking we're here to beg for table scraps. Your job is to avoid escalation. My job, Danny said, straightening, is to protect human lives. That includes engineers, relief workers, and the schoolteacher who got spaced because some trigger-happy bug thought Earth ships looked like target practice. I gave them a chance. They laughed. Now they're wondering if laughter is an evolutionary weakness. Mason stared at him. Something in his eyes flickered, the smallest twitch of recognition. Then it was gone. You're being reassigned. Effective immediately. Danny blinked. You're benching me? Until the review board clears this stunt, yes. Danny sighed. You always said I'd go out in style. Mason's voice dropped. You're not going anywhere. They've summoned you to the neutral zone. You're meeting with the Valtari. Danny's grin vanished. The Valtari? He repeated. Seriously? They haven't talked to humans since the Chicago incident. Exactly. They've requested you. By name. And they want Frank present. Danny stared at the communicator, then at Frank, who remained still as ever. Well, crap. The transmission ended. He pocketed the device, rubbed his face, and muttered, Why is it never the friendly gelatin species that want to talk? The Valtari were ancient, cold-blooded strategists with skin like polished obsidian and minds wired for empire building. Nobody knew what their home planet looked like. Nobody had ever been invited. The only thing anyone agreed on was that if the Valtari wanted to meet, it wasn't for small talk and appetizers. It was usually because they were deciding whether to obliterate or absorb. They took the shuttle in silence. Danny sat with his legs crossed, watching stars streak past the viewport, thinking about all the times he'd nearly died from food poisoning, bar fights, and one very confused AI toaster. Frank remained silent beside him, one giant fist resting on a steel knee. Somewhere behind those impenetrable plates of armor was a man who'd once been human, maybe still was, but Danny never asked. Frank's story was written in scars, not words. The shuttle docked at a platform orbiting no known world. The Valtari didn't leave coordinates. You followed their instructions, or you vanished into deep space. When the airlock opened, two Valtari stood waiting, tall, lean creatures with slit-pupil eyes and voices that always sounded like you owed them something. Ambassador Rojas, Apex Unit Frank. The speaker bowed slightly. Your presence is acknowledged. Come, speak. The chamber they were led into was carved from some reflective black stone, lit only by ambient pulses from beneath the floor. Danny whistled softly. Wow, really leaning into that ancient death cult aesthetic, huh? You guys ever try feng shui? The lead Valtari didn't respond. Instead, he gestured toward a raised dais, where a holographic map of the galactic frontier hovered, flickering with bright red clusters. You have altered council dynamics, the Valtari said. Their confidence has splintered. Their arrogance is wounded. Danny raised an eyebrow. Is that a compliment? It is a warning. The wounded lash out. But sometimes they learn. Frank's visor pulsed once. The Valtari continued. Your demonstration has introduced an equation previously dismissed. That humans are not anomalies. That your unpredictability is calculated. Danny smiled without warmth. Unpredictability is our national pastime, along with conspiracy theories and breakfast cereal that turns your milk blue. We are aware, the Valtari said, and Danny wasn't entirely sure if they were being sarcastic. The map zoomed in on a sector near the border of council-controlled space. A red circle pulsed ominously. We have intercepted plans for a strike. Target, Earth Outpost 9. Justification, military containment of your Apex unit. They fear what it represents, what your alliance with it implies. Danny swore under his breath. So Krex's tantrum got traction. They move within hours, the Valtari said. You have one opportunity. Dissuade them, or destroy their ability to act. Danny looked at the map, then at Frank. You really want me to play peacekeeper again? No. We want them to see. To understand what stands behind your jokes and music and culture of caffeinated defiance. Fine. But if this goes sideways, I'm blaming you. The Valtari turned. We do not care. Back aboard their shuttle, Danny rubbed his temples, while Frank silently recalibrated some internal system. You know, most diplomats get fruit baskets and awkward toasts. I get assassins and ancient alien power plays. He looked up at Frank. You think we can do this without killing anybody? Frank's visor flickered. Red, then neutral. It didn't answer. Danny smiled. Didn't think so. All right, Frank. Saddle up. Let's go teach them what a diplomatic predator really looks like. As the stars bent around them again and the engines hummed toward a distant confrontation, Danny reclined in his seat and whispered, Please let Krex be wearing something stupid when we show up, like ceremonial shoulder pads. Behind him, Frank's fingers twitched, not from tension, anticipation, and somewhere ahead, council warships began to move. But so did Earth's most dangerous negotiator, and the thing that walked behind him. Danny hated warships, not because they were dangerous or because they smelled like recycled despair, but because they were designed with all the charm of a tax audit. Everything was either sharp, metallic, or humming with power that said, Touch me and you'll liquefy. The Krex flagship, the Barathum Claw, was no exception. It looked like someone gave a porcupine a weapons budget and a grudge. The human diplomat stood in the center of the docking bay, arms folded, sunglasses still firmly in place despite the dim light. Frank stood behind him, as motionless and imposing as a statue carved by a vengeful god. The two had arrived unarmed, officially. Danny had 2 knives and a flare gun hidden in his coat. Frank had himself. As the blast door slid open, Krex marched in flank by 2 of his generals. His scales gleamed with ceremonial oils. His chest puffed out like he was auditioning for a villain role in a Saturday morning cartoon. Rojas, Krex spat, his tone like sandpaper on glass. We did not summon you. Danny gave a mock salute. And yet here I am, like a bad penny or your mother-in-law, ready to disappoint. You are trespassing on a military vessel, and you're parking at 37 clicks from Earth Outpost 9. That's not a visit. That's a prelude to stupidity. Krex's eyes flared. You humans are reckless, emotion-driven. You hide behind monsters and myths. Danny glanced back at Frank, who remained still. Funny. That myth is the reason you haven't declared war. Say hi, Frank. Frank said nothing, but the floor vibrated slightly as he shifted his weight. One of the Krex generals twitched. I should kill you where you stand. Krex growled. Danny stepped forward, unblinking. Go ahead. But before my body hits the floor, Frank will turn this docking bay into a Jackson Pollock exhibit. You ever seen one of those? Human splatter paint. We get creative when we're angry. Krex hesitated, then hissed in frustration. You mock the council. You mock this armada. Do you think your wit protects you? No, Danny said. I think truth does. You don't want a war. You want a demonstration. Something you can show the other species. Look at us, we humbled the humans. But you know the cost will be higher than you're willing to pay. We may be reckless, Krex, but we're also persistent. And weird. And really, really hard to kill. Krex narrowed his eyes. You believe your words can prevent a fleet's fire? I don't care about the fleet. I care about the crew, the engineers, the communications officers, the greenhorns who signed up for duty and got assigned to this circus. I'm giving you a way out. No humiliation. No battle. Just a new understanding. Krex paused. The silence stretched. Somewhere, a cooling fan hummed. I challenge you, he said finally. Single combat. You and me. In the pit. Danny blinked. You've got to be kidding. The ancient right still holds, Krex said. Victory determines the fate of Earth Outpost 9. Danny turned to Frank. Thoughts? Frank didn't move. Danny sighed. Fine. You want a duel, Krex? You got one. But I get to pick the terms. Krex looked intrigued. What terms? Danny reached into his jacket and pulled out a crumpled cassette tape. Dance off. The silence that followed was immediate and profound. A what? Krex growled. Dance off, Danny said, popping the tape into a portable stereo. Earth tradition. Settled everything from neighborhood disputes to galactic contracts in the 80s. Loser backs down. Winner gets bragging rights and a lifetime supply of swagger. You jest. Danny pressed play. The opening bars of Footloose blasted through the chamber. Frank twitched. No jest, Danny said. This is legally binding under subsection 27C of the Interstellar Cultural Respect Act. You mock our methods. You face them. Or you admit your fleet fears a little Earth rhythm. Krex snarled, but his generals hesitated. The council had made embarrassing cultural refusals before. There were consequences. And footage. You choose humiliation over violence? Krex asked. No, Danny said, stepping forward, popping and locking with shocking precision. I choose survival with style. To everyone's surprise, Krex accepted, perhaps out of pride. Perhaps because no one had ever challenged him to dance before, and his ego couldn't comprehend backing down. Either way, the pit was prepared. Danny danced first. The moves were absurd, drawn from a mishmash of breakdancing, 80s pop videos, and one poorly remembered middle school talent show. But it had energy, passion, and rhythm. Krex followed. His movements were violent, jagged, intimidating, sure, but rhythmically bankrupt. He stomped. He flailed. At one point he attempted a spin that took out part of the railing. When it ended, the silence was deafening. Then one Krex general clapped. Hesitantly. Then another. Then more. Danny stood, panting, grinning. Told you. You've got to cut loose. Krex fumed. This is not honorable. It's peaceful, Danny said. You spared your men, and gave them something to laugh about. Frank took one step forward. The floor creaked. Krex finally bowed his head. The fleet will withdraw. Danny nodded. Good. Next time you want to test humans, bring a mixed tape. They left without ceremony. The Krex didn't stop them. No one dared. Back aboard their shuttle, Danny collapsed into his seat and groaned. I need electrolytes and therapy. Frank, for the first time in recorded history, extended a hand and offered Danny a juice box from a compartment in his leg. Danny took it, bewildered. You've had this the whole time. Frank's visor flickered. It was almost a smirk. As they left Krex space, a message pinged. It was from the Valtari. Asterisk, your solution was unexpected. The council is disoriented. This pleases us, asterisk. Danny replied without thinking. Glad I could confuse intergalactic politics with jazz hands. He turned to Frank. We're not done. That performance bought us time, not safety. Krex will stew. The council will whisper. And next time, it won't be a dance. Frank nodded. Danny finished the juice box, crumpled it, and tossed it in the bin. But next time, we'll be ready. The stars outside shifted. The shuttle accelerated. And somewhere in council space, a dozen species rewrote their diplomatic playbooks to include terms like boogie and Earth cultural deterrence. Humanity had made a point, and the galaxy had started to listen. The calm after the storm felt unnatural. The Krex fleet was gone, retreating into the folds of space like a bad memory. Danny sat at the navigation console of their shuttle, staring at the empty stars ahead. His fingers drummed a quiet rhythm on the surface, a subtle reminder that even in peace, the world was never truly still. His mind was already turning, anticipating the next fight, the next hurdle. Frank, as usual, stood motionless behind him, a presence as constant as gravity. His silent reliability was both comforting and unnerving. There was no casual chatter, no pointless questions. Frank wasn't a conversationalist. He wasn't even a person in the traditional sense. He was a weapon, a machine built for survival, and at times, he was the only reason Danny was still alive. The communication console pinged. Danny flicked the switch, bringing up a message from the Valtari. The alien species had remained an enigmatic ally, their motives often unclear, but their backing invaluable. Danny had learned to appreciate their cryptic support, even if he had no idea what they wanted in return. Rojas, the voice crackled through. It was the Valtari representative, though his face wasn't visible. Just a shadowed figure behind the static. You've made an impression. The Krex will not forget this humiliation. Danny smirked. I don't plan on letting them. You have stirred something in the galaxy. The Council will move, perhaps sooner than you think. The tides are shifting. Be ready. We'll be ready. But let me guess, you're not going to tell me what those shifts are you? The Valtari's voice, deep and melodic, was laced with a hint of amusement. Your Earth has a unique way of triggering change, Rojas. You'll see soon enough. Just do not get too comfortable. The line went dead. Danny leaned back in his seat, staring at the now silent screen. Comfortable. Right. He wasn't sure whether the Valtari meant it as a warning or a joke, but either way, he wasn't taking it lightly. The Krex weren't done. No one ever was. A sudden beep from the radar interrupted his thoughts. An unidentified ship was approaching fast. His fingers immediately flew over the controls, calling up the scanning systems. It wasn't a Krex vessel. Frank, Danny muttered, his voice low. Hold tight. We might be about to get a new visitor. The ship came into view, a sleek, polished craft, gliding effortlessly through space like a shadow. It wasn't a warship, but it was certainly a military-grade vessel. No markings, no visible insignia. The radar blinked, and Danny's heart skipped. It wasn't just one ship. 2 more ships dropped out of warp behind it, their designs unmistakable. These ships were built for diplomacy, not battle, but the presence of 3 made Danny uneasy. There was no need for this many vessels for an ambassador. Let's see what the universe has for us now, Danny muttered, tapping a few more buttons to initiate a hailing signal. He didn't have time for anything less than immediate answers. The screen flickered to life, revealing a woman in a sharp, formal uniform. Her posture was rigid, her eyes locked onto Danny's with the intensity of someone who had seen too much. Diplomat Rojas, she began, her voice calm but firm. I represent the Galactic Council. I believe we have much to discuss. Danny didn't trust her tone. Much to discuss? Like what? A rematch. Her gaze didn't falter. You have ruffled feathers, human. And while the Krex will likely avoid an immediate confrontation, there are others who are not so forgiving. And I'm supposed to be worried about that because... She leaned forward slightly, the slightest flicker of something in her eyes. Because the galaxy isn't as forgiving as your dance moves. The words hit harder than any threat. Danny narrowed his eyes. So what? You came all this way to tell me I'm a nuisance. I came here to extend an invitation, she said, her lips curling slightly, to a council meeting, a formal hearing regarding your unorthodox methods of diplomacy. Danny couldn't help but let out a low chuckle. An invitation? Are you serious? You're giving me a seat at the table. You're not being invited for tea, Rojas. You've proven that humanity's methods can provoke, but you've yet to prove they can achieve anything meaningful. She studied him. This is your chance to change that. Danny didn't respond immediately. He didn't have to. He'd been dealing with situations like this his entire life. There was always a right way and a wrong way. People who couldn't see the value in what they did because they were too busy adhering to their precious codes. Codes that, more often than not, led to disaster. Frank shifted behind him, his mechanical presence a silent reminder of the threat that still loomed over the negotiations. Danny had to be careful. He had no idea who this woman was or what kind of political trap they might be setting for him. But the fact that they were offering a seat at the table meant one thing. This wasn't just about him. It was about humanity. It was about proving, once and for all, that Earth wasn't just a small, insignificant player in the vastness of space. It was about showing that humanity, with all its quirks and imperfections, had the power to shape the future of the galaxy. "Okay," Danny said, standing up. He glanced at Frank. "You heard the lady. Let's go have a chat." The woman didn't smile. "You will comply with the rules of the council." "Of course," Danny replied, "as long as we're clear that the rules can be flexible." Her expression remained unreadable. "We'll see, won't we?" The transmission cut off, leaving only the dull hum of the shuttle's engines. Danny sat back down and rubbed his temples, the weight of what was ahead pressing heavily on him. He had no idea what kind of political minefield he was about to step into. But one thing was certain. This wasn't going to be as simple as a dance-off. This was the moment, a test of everything humanity had been building towards. The time had come for Earth to show that it wasn't just about survival. It was about changing the very rules of the game. Danny turned to Frank. "Let's make some noise." Frank didn't respond, but his heavy footsteps as he moved to the cockpit were answer enough. Danny took a deep breath, watching as the stars ahead blurred into streaks of light. There was no turning back now. This wasn't a test of strength. It wasn't a test of diplomacy. It was a test of who could outlast the chaos. And humanity, with all its faults, was really good at that.